The resonance of steel reverberated through the slender passageway like an alarm chime. Frigid atmosphere seeped through the openings in the timber boards as the American commander rotated the substantial key. From within, the noise paralyzed every woman in the dormitory. They had anticipated yelling. Perhaps retribution, but not this. The mechanism clicked closed for an instant. No one stirred. Their respiration misted the atmosphere. Fabric overcoats whispered. Footwear scraped against the frozen cement. Somewhere beyond a power unit sputtered and ceased into quietness. It was beginning 1945, provincial France. A modified storehouse now enclosed with spiked wire and frost. Approximately 40 female German detainees stood stationary, gazes shifting to the commander's palms. The speculation had circulated swifter than the season's breeze. American sentries had begun vanishing, captives after nightfall. When that fastener slid secure, most of them trusted they'd recently entered that roster. The commander's expression was inscrutable. Angular chin, soil on his footwear, a handgun positioned against his waistband. He surveyed the space once, acknowledged slightly, then pivoted to confront them. No translator, no warnings, just that expression that communicated remain composed. The hush was more audible than the mechanism. According to Red Cross documentation, beyond 400,000 German POWs were detained in Allied facilities by conflict's conclusion. About 30,000 were women. Many medical staff or administrators caught behind deteriorating battle boundaries. Few ever witnessed warfare, but imprisonment had its own struggles. Illness, starvation, and disgrace. These women anticipated fury, retaliation, degradation. What they received instead was bewilderment. He secured the entrance himself. One of them subsequently remembered, "We believed this is where they exact retribution." Her statements carried the keen edge of that evening's dread. The commander turned toward a steel furnace in the angle. It was frigid, cinders pale. He knelt, ignited a flame, and nourished it like he'd accomplished it 1,000 occasions before. Embers blazed. Vapor whistled through the metal conduit. The women didn't risk breathing. Why would he confine himself within with them? What was he scheming? Moments elapsed. The heat circulated. The mechanism stayed secured. Then arrived another noise. A platter being pulled across the surface. Steel grinding cement. When the commander glanced up again, he wasn't transporting restraints. He was transporting coffee. And that's where everything commenced to transform. Vapors twisted from the vessels like specters of ordinary existence. The commander's protected palms positioned them down one by one, metallic containers filled to the edge with something that emanated almost surreal. Genuine coffee. Not the cereal replacement they'd become accustomed to, not harsh oak powder, but the intense, robust scent of toasted beans. The German women gazed as if he'd positioned active explosives between them. No one communicated. A few traded glances, uncertain if this was ridicule or compassion. The commander didn't clarify. He simply stated, "Consume before it freezes," and rotated away to distribute the subsequent portion. His manner carried no warning, no arrogance, just exhaustion, the variety of tone you perceive after excessive evenings without rest. Private documentation from the U.S. Army's POW division note that the typical German captive under American supervision obtained 2,800 to 3,200 nutrition units per day, almost twice what civilians in Germany were receiving under restrictions. But statistics don't convert to confidence. In that dim dormitory, statistics didn't concern. Distrust did. One of the women, a former communications specialist, raised her container gradually. The warmth penetrated through her quivering digits. She paused, gazes shifting toward the commander. Was this some variety of deception? Toxin? He intercepted her stare for an instant, just sufficient enough to acknowledge once, then returned to the furnace. The initial taste drew a subtle intake. The flavor was harsh, potent, genuine. Surrounding her, others pursued silently, cautiously. Then arrived the initial ripple of noise in the frozen atmosphere, a exhale, half lament, half comfort. The commander didn't grin. He simply leaned against the entrance frame, observing the vapor ascend like white symbols. Subsequently, one of the captives would express, "Back residents, we never received this quantity, even during restrictions." That phrase would resonate in Red Cross discussions years afterward, a solitary statement that transported all the paradoxes of that season, because in that instance, the adversary wasn't the individual with the coffee. It was the appetite, the chill, the incredulity that gentleness could manifest here. But gentleness doesn't eliminate dread. It only perplexes it. And when perplexity begins to dissolve into inquisitiveness, someone invariably examines the limit. That examination arrived with a flash, and a solitary flame the flash penetrated through the hush. One captive, a youthful medic with trimmed golden locks and gazes that hadn't rested in days, retrieved a wrinkled cigarette. Every head pivoted. Inhaling inside the dormitory was prohibited, and executing it before the American commander. Inconceivable, but she didn't worry. She ignited the flame, protecting the blaze from the current, and drew like it was air. The aroma of tobacco blended with the beverage's diminishing fragrance. The commander froze mid-pace, his stare securing on hers. She released a constant column of vapor toward the upper surface, rebellious, anticipating for him to cry. But he didn't. Instead, he accessed into his own compartment, extracted a container of Lucky Strikes, and ignited one for himself. For a few astonished moments, no one stirred. Then, gradually, unbelievably, he presented her a flame. Cigarettes, by 1945, had transformed the exchange of imprisonment. A solitary one could be bartered for cleanser, nourishment, or even protection. In many facilities, they were the sole thing more precious than sustenance. For an American commander to distribute one, that was a cipher breaker, a subtle defiance against everything the conflict had instructed both factions. The medic accepted the cigarette from his digits, her palm trembling just marginally. The coal illuminated between them, two adversaries connected by routine and vapor. Surrounding them, murmurs rippled like wind through arid vegetation. One woman uttered. He didn't cry. He simply inhaled like we were equivalents. That instance fractured something more profound than dread. The commander appeared fatigued, his uniform creased, bristle shadowing his chin. The flame light captured the metallic identification plates at his neck. You could perceive it in his gazes. This wasn't about control anymore. It was about persistence, his as much as theirs. The atmosphere mellowed. The strain didn't disappear, but it curved, altered. For the initial occasion since their seizure, amusement, modest, anxious, half incredulous, sparkled through the space. Beyond, frost commenced to descend again, tapping gently against the metal covering. The commander extinguished his cigarette, acknowledged once, and proceeded toward the distant surface. The medic observed him depart, her expression inscrutable. When he returned an instant afterward, he wasn't transporting another flame. He was grasping a collection of correspondence, messages from residents. The messages appeared innocent, folds, postage, delicate parchment darkened by transit. But when the commander deposited them on the surface, the atmosphere altered. Every captive identified the penmanship before they ventured touch an envelope. Residence. The term seemed alien now. The medic who had inhaled earlier extended for one, her palms quivering so intensely the parchment rustled like arid foliage. The commander articulated quietly, almost clumsily. "Postal delivery," he stated, his tone subdued enough to resemble regret. Then he commenced arranging them by identity, mispronouncing every syllable, each error softening the strain. Some envelopes were torn, others marked Zensiert, examine it inspected. Ebony fluid blocked out phrases like injuries across statements. He observed a few women struggling with English expressions scrawled in borders, so he proposed to interpret meticulously, tenderly. When he arrived to one that referenced Hamburg, he wavered his gazes, skimming the statement twice. Then he interpreted around the terror, not through it. He excluded firestorm. He excluded vanished. By middle 1945, 75% of Germany's principal municipalities had experienced substantial devastation. Millions displaced, hundreds of thousands deceased. But these women didn't possess statistics. They possessed identities, avenues, chambers. He interpreted the messages like delicate artifacts, pausing when the tears arrived too rapidly. He conveyed softly. One of them subsequently stated as if attempting not to shatter us. Beyond frost maintained falling. The power unit sputtered, then ceased again, immersing the dormitory into a quietness so profound it seemed tangible. The commander remained there, message in palm, the illumination from a petroleum lantern wavering across his expression. He wasn't expected to execute this. Commanders didn't convey personal correspondence to captives. It obscured the boundary between captor and solace. One of the women finally inquired, "Why are you assisting us?" He didn't respond, just folded the message, positioned it back into her palms, and gazed toward the vibrating panes. "Tempests intensifying," he muttered. "Remain within," she acknowledged, grasping the parchment like it was existence itself. He pivoted, proceeding for the power unit shelter beyond. That was the final thing they witnessed before everything went ebony. The instant the illuminations ceased, the realm contracted to noise. The power unit beyond gave one final metallic moan, and then silent, dense absolute. A moment afterward, footwear scraped against timber. A container descended. Someone gasped. The obscurity consumed everything. Breeze shrieked through openings in the planks, transporting particles of frost within. The climate was declining rapidly. Documentation show season 1945 struck below -10 degrees Celsius in regions of northern France. Within moments, the chamber transformed into a freezer. The women clustered together, their respiration transforming to mist. Someone murmured that the Americans had severed the electricity on intention. Someone else murmured, "Retaliation." Then a metallic squeak, the exterior entrance shifting. Terror penetrated through the dormitory. "He's returning back." One woman stated, tone fracturing. They prepared for yelling, for retribution, for the noise of weapon steel. Instead, the entrance stayed secured. Nothing, solely the breeze. It's peculiar how obscurity intensifies dread. Every recollection becomes a danger. Every hush an allegation. For these women, dread was muscular memory. In Luftwaffe shelters, in evening attacks, in interrogations they'd acquired that obscurity invariably brought commands, and commands invariably wounded. One of them ignited a flame, the blaze quivering. For half a moment her expression appeared, pallid lips fractured, gazes expansive. The flame hissed extinguished, abandoning solely the aroma of sulfur. A lament rippled through the chamber, then footfalls. Gradual, substantial, purposeful. The fastener rotated. The entrance opened just sufficient for a blast of frost to whip through. An outline occupied the portal. The American commander. He didn't cry. He didn't even appear irate. What he transported in his limbs wasn't an armament. It was a collection of coverings. Behind him, another soldier pursued, grasping a platter of broth, containers and a bundle of tapers. For a moment, no one stirred. The women couldn't process it. He advanced within, positioned the coverings down, and ignited a taper. The minute blaze threw elongated shadows across the barriers, transforming expressions into moving forms. "He's assisting us," someone murmured. The commander just acknowledged toward the furnace. "We'll repair the electricity when the breeze ceases," he stated. The taper illumination wavered across his expression, and in that delicate radiance, the boundaries of adversary and rescuer obscured completely, because what arrived next wasn't commands, it was heat. The taper illumination drew gentle halos on the frost-bitten barriers. Shadows extended, quivering like phantoms of warriors who never returned residence. The commander knelt by the furnace, persuading the feeble flame with torn periodical. His protections were absent now. His digits were crude, crimson from the chill. Each ignition of the flame illuminated up the women's expressions, doubtful, fatigued, but surviving. When the blaze finally captured, the steel hissed, emitting a delicate circle of warmth. The women drifted nearer, silent. He didn't articulate, didn't give commands. He simply maintained nourishing the furnace like an individual sustaining a vow no one requested for. Beyond, the tempest slammed against the ridged covering, frost accumulating against the entrance he'd secured hours earlier. From the within, Geneva protocols at the period required compassionate treatment for captives, but documentation indicates solely a portion of Allied facilities pursued them as rigorously as this one. Sustenance deficiencies, congestion, and rage obscured the boundaries of control. Yet this commander identified lost in documentation, selected to pursue not statute, but morality. One of the women, a former medic, presented her palms to assist. He shook his cranium, then transferred her the spoon anyway. They distributed broth together, delicate, liquid mixture, but it emanated like existence. He appeared colder than us, she remembered, but he maintained distributing broth. That modest gesture transported more astonishment than cruelty ever could. The taper wavered against his expression, capturing something that wasn't power. It was exhaustion, empathy, maybe even remorse. Conflict had eliminated away everything except modest human motions, and here, in a timber shelter full of adversaries, that compassion was burning quietly, obstinately. Beyond, the tempest's shriek mellowed into a monotonous roar. Within, spoons scraped steel vessels. The women enveloped themselves in military coverings that still emanated faintly of lubricant and tobacco. For the initial occasion since seizure, no one dreaded the obscure. Then, near the rear of the dormitory, one woman murmured what everyone else was contemplating, but couldn't articulate out audible. "He's defending us." The others didn't respond, but you could perceive it in their gazes, the emerging perplexity, the gradual fracture of animosity they'd been instructed to transport. And when dawn finally commenced to bleed pale through the panes, something else had already commenced to circulate speculation. By dawn, the dormitory had altered. The dread was still there, but quieter, reorganized. The women stirred differently now, glancing toward the entrance, not with terror, but with something like confidence. The narrative of what the American commander had executed. The secured entrance, the beverage, the coverings, was already circulating beyond their barriers. In a conflict constructed on speculation, compassion circulated swiftest. It commenced as murmurs in the cleansing queue and circulated to nearby compounds. "There's a commander who defends the Frauenlager," they stated. "He contradicts commands." The expression resonated hazardous, excessively hazardous, but no one refuted it. They'd witnessed the tapers wavering through the evening, the vapor from broth ascending like signals in the chill. By late February, beyond 1,500 female German POWs were recorded laboring willingly in Allied medical stations and battlefield hospitals. Some were medics, others just desired to sense productive again. At this facility, that transformation commenced quietly, with the women repairing torn Allied garments, then stitching fresh dressings. No one instructed them to. They simply executed it. He didn't request. One woman remembered subsequently, "He merely didn't prevent us." In the angle of the dormitory, two women inscribed notes on fragments of provision parchment, identities of absent siblings, mothers, municipalities. The commander permitted it, even transferred them to a Red Cross operator once a period. That simple motion, posting messages from captives, was technically against procedure, but statutes were already bending under the burden of fatigue and chill. They designated him insane, one sentry muttered. We designated him honorable. One captive would subsequently inscribe in a journal-concealed residence years after. The women commenced greeting him differently. Not as Herr Commander, not as adversary, but with an acknowledgement, an expression that stated, "We perceive you." Compassion had penetrated the vocabulary of endurance, but in wartime, gentleness is never invisible for prolonged. Headquarters didn't appreciate narratives that rendered conflict sound compassionate. When speculation contacted the district authority, assertions that a U.S. commander was displaying excessive friendliness. With German captives, documentation shifted rapidly. Examiners were dispatched not to commend, but to investigate. And the day they arrived, the women comprehended instantly. The footwear were cleaner, the expressions colder, and the commander standing at the portal, spine straight, chin tense, appeared for the initial occasion like an individual anticipating for verdict. They arrived just after noon, 2 vehicles grinding over frozen soil, wheels hissing through slush. The noise transported before the vision, and every woman in the dormitory went stationary. Through the chill, misted pain, they observed 3 commanders advance out, refined footwear, pristine collars, journals under limbs. Examiners, headquarters had arrived. The entrance swung open with practiced power. The primary commander scanned the chamber, expression vacant, but gazes keen. The women stood instinctively, forming irregular cues, their protector. Their commander saluted rigidly, his expression a covering. The hush was surgical. Peculiar arrangements here, one examiner stated, recording notes, sanitary, tranquil, collaborative. His manner rendered collaborative resemble like a violation. Examinations like these were customary by 1945. Documentation subsequently disclosed that 1 in 5 Allied POW facilities confronted inquiry for disciplinary abnormalities, an administrative expression concealing everything from savagery to empathy. Here the accusation was the subsequent. The commander had obscured limits, distributed beverage, interpreted messages, secured himself in for protection, not authority. The examiners prowled between bunks, verifying provision records, glancing at the women's expressions. One of them paused near the furnace, scowling at the collection of repaired Allied garments arranged neatly beside it. Who sanctioned this? The commander didn't recoil. I executed, he stated uniformly. Inactive palms freeze swifter. The examiner glanced up, writing instrument suspended. You're cognizant this is against behavior policy? Affirmative, sir. A prolonged intermission. The sole noise was the breeze grinding frost against the barriers. The women scarcely respired. The medic from before observed his expression, comprehending he was deceiving, not to rescue himself, but to defend them. Subsequently, declarations from comparable examinations note that understanding commanders were often relocated, sometimes disciplined. In his documentation, What Minimal Survives, there's a phrase inscribed in graphite: excessive clemency toward adversary personnel. He deceived. One captive subsequently stated to defend us. The examiners sealed their journals. We'll submit our documentation, the primary stated curtly, advancing back into the chill. The vehicle's motors rumbled to existence, diminishing into the white distance. Within, no one articulated for a prolonged period. The commander remained by the entrance, palms still positioned on the fastener, gazes secured on the snowstorm beyond. Because he comprehended what arrived next, commands invariably pursue hush. The commands arrived 3 days subsequently, typed, stamped, and frigid. a folded slip within an envelope designated personnel relocation. He interpreted it once, twice, then folded it again like a message he didn't desire to open. The penmanship in the signature section wasn't recognizable. It never was when the information was adverse. That dawn, the women observed something different. The commander's travel container half accumulated near his bunk, his overcoat absent from its peg. Speculation circulated rapidly, swifter than the breeze slipping through the fissures in the covering. "He's being relocated," someone murmured. "They're extracting him away." He didn't verify it, not at initial. He proceeded about his circuits as customary, verifying the furnace, tallying coverings, replenishing the broth kettle, though the container was nearly vacant. Solely when the vehicle arrived did he finally articulate. "Commands," he stated merely, "fresh assignment." The term fresh seemed like a deprivation. The medic, the identical one who had inhaled the initial cigarette, advanced forward, gazes crimson from sleepless evenings. "Will you return back?" she inquired. He gazed at her for a prolonged moment, the variety of expression that attempts to memorize an expression before the realm alters again. Then he gave the smallest shake of his cranium. By 1946, more than 130,000 American commanders had been rotated residents or relocated from Europe. To headquarters, it was operations. To these women, it was banishment all over again. He aligned them up one final occasion out of routine, not statute. Frost was descending, dense particles landing on helmets and locks alike. The women remained straight, silent. When he saluted, it wasn't military. It was intimate. A tranquil motion that stated, "I witnessed you as human." No statements, no addresses, just footwear crunching on Frost as he traversed the courtyard toward the anticipating vehicle. Each advance resonated like a concluding section. The operator didn't gaze at him. Relocations were customary, but this one wasn't. From the dormitory pane, the women observed him depart until the vehicle pivoted and disappeared into the white horizon. No one wept. They simply remained there, palms pressed to the chill glass, the heat of their respiration diminishing swifter than he executed. 3 days subsequently, the frost dissolved sufficient for someone to discover it, concealed under a metal container near the furnace. A message. It was modest sufficient to overlook, folded, yellowing, folded twice, concealed under a damaged metal container by the frigid furnace. The women discovered it the dawn after the frost eased. No envelope, no identity, just a delicate sheet of U.S. military stationery with penmanship that inclined marginally to the right. The medic unfolded it gradually, half terrified it might be a deception, another form of farewell enveloped in obligation. But the fluid was genuine. The statement simple. Statutes are statutes, but compassion is also one. That was it. No position, no date, no signature, just that phrase. The dormitory stayed silent for a prolonged period. Then one woman commenced weeping, not the intense laments of sorrow, but tranquil, constant tears of someone remembering heat. The commander hadn't just abandoned them provisions. He'd abandoned them a statement to grasp onto. Documentarians years subsequently would discover notes about comparable motions, dozens of anonymous messages abandoned in Red Cross parcels or attached to bunk supports between 1945 and 1946. Minimal portions of compassion slipped through the apparatus of conflict. He didn't obligate us statements. One survivor stated decades subsequently, but he presented us something that outlasted commands. The medic folded the note and positioned it back under the container, like returning an artifact to its shrine. For periods they protected it, straightened it when it twisted, concealed it when fresh sentries arrived through. No one ventured to throw it away. Something transformed in them. After that, labor became lighter, not simpler. They distributed their provisions without being instructed. The animosity that had once occupied every hush was gradually replaced by something else: identification. The comprehension that even in conflict, someone had selected not to despise them. For the initial occasion, one inscribed subsequently, "I desired to trust the conflict could terminate inside us, not surrounding us." Beyond, the frost maintained dissolving. Season seeped into the soil. The realm beyond the spiked wire was advancing on. But within that timber dormitory, one gesture of morality had established itself profound. Years subsequently, when comrades and inquiries returned, that solitary phrase would resurface, fluid faded, significance stronger, and one of them would convey the narrative commencing from the noise of a mechanism clicking secured. It was 1978 when the narrative finally discovered a tone. A recording crew from a West German documentary arrived at a modest residence outside Hamburg. Within, an elderly woman anticipated by the pain, her locks pale, her tone delicate but constant. On the surface before her sat a solitary photograph, faded, angles twisting, its exterior fractured like elderly ice. The questioner requested her to portray the individual in the image. She gazed at it for a prolonged period before responding. "I don't remember his identity," she stated gently, "solely that he secured the entrance behind us. The representation was ebony and white, grainy, an American commander in a substantial season overcoat standing by a timber dormitory entrance. Behind him, faint silhouettes of women in darkness." She traced the margins with her digit, as if the motion could bring him back. Less than 3% of female POW declarations survived in repositories. Most were lost, incinerated, or dismissed as irrelevant to the grand chronicles of individuals and militaries. But this one executed. Her statements, interpreted years subsequently, transported the burden of recollection untouched by governance. He secured us in, not to confine us, but to maintain the realm out. The questioner inquired what she signified. She grinned faintly. He comprehended something the garments forgot. That dignity can survive imprisonment. Beyond, the municipality hummed with contemporary noise, vehicles, radios, neon. But within that modest chamber, period stayed frozen in 1945 in a snow-bound dormitory in the waver of taper illumination on frightened expressions. The narrative didn't require embellishment. The hush between her statements stated more than addresses ever could. Before the crew departed, she unfolded a modest plastic sleeve. Within it was the note, the identical one, folded yellow fluid, nearly disappeared. She positioned it on the surface for the recording device. The statements scarcely legible now, but still visible. Statutes are statutes, but compassion is also one. The recording operator zoomed in, and for an instant the frame occupied with that solitary statement. The past condensed into a truth no longer about factions or banners, but about selections. The woman glanced up, gazes radiant under the studio illuminations. "He was expected to protect us," she stated. "Instead, he reminded us we were still human." That's how she terminated it, with appreciation, not triumph. Because some conflicts terminate quietly, taper by taper.